No doubt. So, as many of you may know, last month, the city of St. Paul passed the St. Paul Recovery Act, which sets up a commission to begin studying reparations for the American descendants of chattel slavery who reside in St. Paul, Minnesota. So just want to come to you, build with you a little bit real quick about why we passed the St. Paul Recovery Act. The St. Paul Recovery Act is reparations for the American descendants of slavery who reside in St. Paul, Minnesota. So the St. Paul Recovery Act will set up a commission, and then that commission will give recommendations to the city council on how to do reparations at the municipal level for the American descendants of chattel slavery. The resolution also gave an apology for holding Dred Scott in bondage. It also gave an apology for the resolution also was an apology for what happened to the Rondo community and for the city of St. Paul's involvement in white supremacy and institutional racism. So things like housing discrimination, employment discrimination, redlining and redistricting. There's an effort underway right now here in the city of St. Paul called Mapping St. Paul, where they're dealing with racial covenants. For those of you who don't know what racial covenants are, racial covenants would be like mortgages or deeds that say, if you buy this house in this neighborhood, which most likely were nice neighborhoods where the home equity is off the Richter, and it allows them to build generational wealth. Those deeds said Black people couldn't buy houses in certain neighborhoods. So those are what we're talking about when we're talking about white supremacy and institutional racism and discrimination. It's in housing, it's in the medical system, it's in the employment system, it's in the banking system, it's in systems. That's why we call it systemic racism. So you can work hard as you want to, but if the system, what did they say? Systems break down individual talent. And that's what the Anglo-Saxon realized very early. So there used to be different tribes, and they start instead of warring with each other, they said, let's come together, you know? And so they stopped being individuals and they started creating systems, and systems break down individual talent. So the system of white supremacy has broken down the Black community in a very serious way, to where we have a very serious wealth gap in America and here in St. Paul. According to Demos, the U.S. racial wealth gap is substantial and is driven by public policy decisions. So public policies are like laws, right? So slavery was a public policy in America for hundreds of years. Redlining and redistricting, that's public policy. Jim Crow laws, that's public policies. Different colored water fountains, that's public policies. Those housing discriminations or those deeds that we were just talking about, that's public policy. Stop and frisk is public policy. Racial profiling is public policies. And if these public policies cause harm to the Black community, then there's a debt that's owed, right? So that's what the St. Paul Recovery Act is about. It's about stopping the harm that is happening to Black lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and addressing historical wrongs, and then adding repair to that. You dig? The racial wealth gap, according to the Brookings Institute, at $171,000, the net worth of a typical white family is nearly 10 times greater than that of a Black family, $17,000 in 2016. According to Forbes, the median Black household wealth will hit zero by 2053. And to find out more, you can go to the www.stpaulrecoveryact.com. So if the median Black income for Blacks is going to hit zero by 2053, we don't have a lot of time to play around, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have time to play at all, right? So that's the economic crisis that the American descendants of slavery find ourselves in right now. Where in 20 years, 30 years, the median income for Black people will be zero. And then that means like we're going back into something that's very destructive. This is why reparations is so important. And I don't think a lot of people, even Black people, understood how important it was until COVID hit. And then COVID kind of exposed just how bad the racial wealth gap in St. Paul is. So I'm gonna keep going on, and then I'm gonna tell you how you can get involved, right? This information is on www.stpaulrecoveryact.com. St. Paul per capita income by race and ethnicity. Source, United States Census Bureau. 5-year estimate from 2013 to 2017. So this is pre-COVID. You know what I mean? According to the city of St. Paul, per capita income is defined as the average amount of income earned among a group of people in a year. Over the last 5 decades, the gap in pay between workers at the top and bottom of the income scale has consistently grown nationally and in St. Paul, widening the gap in per capita income between white people and people of color. Source, stpaul.gov, www.stpaulrecoveryact.com. So in this graph is showing whites alone in St. Paul at about, this is income, this ain't median, 42,874. I think that number is closer to 60,000 right now. And then for Blacks, it was $15,577 a year income for the American descendants of chattel slavery who reside in St. Paul. That's not sustainable, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why we must demand reparations. And the reason why it's that low is because of systemic racism. We know the people in St. Paul. We know the Black people in St. Paul. They're not dumb, they're not lazy, but they are oppressed. And that's why the St. Paul Recovery Act is here to start undoing some of that damage that has been done by white supremacy so that we can start building generational wealth for those whose families went through Jim Crow, went through the lynching period, went through slavery, right? St. Paul home ownership by race and ethnicity, 2013 through 2017. Real quick. The wealth gap reflects itself in home ownership disparities in St. Paul, Minnesota. Home ownership is defined as a household living in a space they own and control, rather than paying rent to stay in a space owned and controlled by someone else. So this is the whole nexus of reparation, is about ownership and control. Slavery was about ownership and control of Black lives, right? And we were chattel. Chattel means property. So that means that Black people were the property of another group who benefited socially, politically, and economically off of controlling our nation, our labor, right? So, yeah, so but I'm gonna stop right here and just let you know that that's the racial wealth gap. That's what it's looking like right here in St. Paul, Minnesota, and throughout the country. And that's what the St. Paul Recovery Act is about. It's about addressing generational wealth through home ownership, about addressing our business community, about addressing the education gap in Minnesota. Minnesota has one of the biggest education gaps in America. Minnesota has one of the biggest home ownership gaps. Of course, we know about George Floyd. We know about Marcus Golden. We know about Philando Castile. So this is ground zero for the fight for police accountability, right? Minnesota is the battleground right now for reparations and police accountability and system change, right? So I'm glad that we're here. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad you're here for this fight, or for, this new energy that's in America today. We're going to take a quick break from our listening audience here on WFNU, and we're going to jump into some music real quick. And I'm going to keep building with our Facebook audience real quick, right here on 94.1 FM, Frogtown Tuned In Radio. No doubt. No doubt. What's good, y'all? So, to y'all on Facebook, how do you feel about the HR 40 hearing? We're going to discuss the HR 40 hearing momentarily. One of the most interesting parts to me of the HR 40 hearing was Herschel Walker's testimony. I thought Herschel Walker's testimony was profound, because a certain part of his testimony, he said he thought HR 40 was incredible. And as he was sitting there talking about racism, we're also, they're talking about slavery, they're talking about institutional racism, they're talking about investments. I think Herschel Walker started changing how he felt about HR 40. So then he started saying, basically, he agrees with it, but that it might be hard to find the findings part of it might be kind of complicated. But then the more he spoke, to me, he was answering his own questions. So he said, at one point, he said that, and I remember this, especially for those of us who were in Minnesota and seeing the trade when Herschel Walker got traded to the Minnesota Vikings. So he said when he was little, he was getting bullied by white racists. And that when he got older, he was diagnosed with mental illness because he was being bullied when he was a little boy. So in our lessons, it says he fears him now today, even though that he's a grown man, because he put fear in him when he was a little baby, right? And Herschel Walker said that in the hearing, that he was diagnosed. So when he had almost tried to kill himself up here in Minnesota, he had ran his car like into a tree or something, and that was because he was saying he was having a mental breakdown because of something that happened to him that was racist when he was little. So that's called post-traumatic slavery syndrome. And that's why we talk about health, wellness, and healing for Black families and communities. And Herschel Walker himself needs health, wellness, and healing. He needs to deal with PTSS, but he doesn't know that. So when this hearing got underway, he started going through that. Yes, and a lot of us, even the other Republican who was running the So we're gonna come back to that. I'm gonna hold that thought. We're gonna get back to talking about the St. Paul Recovery Act to our listening audience because we got to let them know how they can get involved. No doubt, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. You are listening to the Trahern Crew Show on 94.1 FM, Frogtown Tuned In Radio. So the St. Paul Recovery Act, as I was saying, apologized for holding Dred Scott in military bondage at Fort Snelling. It apologized for the destruction of the Rondo neighborhood. The Rondo neighborhood was a thriving Black community with Black home ownership and Black businesses. And that was destroyed due to the freeway that was ran through the community. And those Black families were displaced. And because of Jim Crow laws, because of racial covenants, it was hard for a lot of those families to get back into this neighborhood and find a housing, right? So remember, with the racial covenants, even if you could afford to buy a house, doesn't mean that they would let you buy a house because you're Black. So that's what that's another thing we're going to be addressing. We're going to be addressing police brutality, or the criminal, what I call the criminal injustice system. But we'll be addressing the criminal justice system, and we'll be getting this commission together. So we'd like to come to your church. We'd like to come to your business. We'd like to come talk to your organization about the St. Paul Recovery Act and how your organization or how you can get involved, or if you want to be part of the commission. So what's about to happen right now in March, applications for people who want to sit on the Legislative Advisory Committee for the St. Paul Recovery Act. The Legislative Advisory Committee, we're thinking around Juneteenth that it might launch, but we're not going to rush. But we're thinking Juneteenth that the city council may have the Legislative Advisory Committee up and running, and the applications for people to sit on the Legislative Advisory Committee for the St. Paul Recovery Act Reparations Committee will be out next month. So we want to get out to your organization and talk to them about this opportunity. So you can contact City Councilwoman Jane Prince and let her know, or you can contact most likely any of the city council members and let them know that you would like some of us to come out and let your organizations know about the Legislative Advisory Committee and the application process. And those applications should be out or should be available on the City of St. Paul's website next month. But if you want us to come do a presentation about the St. Paul Recovery Act and about the Legislative Advisory Committee process, contact City Councilwoman Jane Prince, or you can contact me. My email is traherncrews@gmail.com. I'll put it here real quick. At gmail.com. And we just want to get out here and do outreach to the community, let you know about the St. Paul Recovery Act, and give people an opportunity, because this effort has to be led by the American descendants of chattel slavery community. Slavery happened to us. Redlining and redistricting happened to us. white supremacy and institutional racism continues to happen to us. So this effort needs to be led by us. And it's going to also be a healing process too. So please connect with us so you can get plugged in. Real quick, like I was just explaining to our listening audience, the HR 40 hearing was earlier this week. And Herschel Walker spoke, man. And it was interesting. And I was just reflecting, the Vikings. I was telling my son, like, yo, man, the Vikings had traded away all of our picks. They traded away draft picks, some of our defense and offensive line, like some of our best players for Herschel Walker. But an article that was read earlier said that the person who made the trade for Herschel Walker was doing it because he was under pressure because people were saying he was racist. So he wanted to give Herschel a big contract, bring in this superstar to make it appear like he wasn't racist. And that really hurt the Vikings organization. But while Herschel was up here and while all that was happening, he had a mental health crisis. And during the hearing, during the HR 40 hearing, so there was a hearing about HR 40. HR 40 is House Resolution 40. The 40 stands for the 40 acres and a mule that was supposed to go to the descendants of slavery after emancipation. So Herschel Walker was there to testify on the Republican side to say that he disagrees with HR 40. But if you listen to the whole testimony, you can see him going through some emotional things, man. Struggling with how he feels about all of this. So when he was here with the Vikings, he had a mental health crisis and tried to commit suicide by running his car off the road, and he hit a tree. He was diagnosed with mental illness, and the reason why he said this during the hearing, so I'm not saying nothing, this isn't no joke or no, not to make fun. This is real and this is serious, and this is what white supremacy and institutional racism does. This is the trauma that it leaves on Black lives whose ancestors went through slavery. He said that he was diagnosed with mental illness when he was playing here for the Vikings because he was being bullied when he was little by some white racist kids. They were racist and they were bullying him when he was little. So when he became an adult and came to Minnesota, it all triggered him. And then he tried to commit suicide. And that alone, to me, made the case for reparations. So one part of reparations that we've been studying a lot, and even medical professionals have been talking about, is health, wellness, and healing for Black families and communities, where we don't really have Black doctors that can treat post-traumatic slavery syndrome. I forget the sister's name, but there's a beautiful doctor, a strong woman who talks about PTSS, post-traumatic slavery syndrome. You can look that up and check her out. We'll try to get her on the show here soon. But she talks about post-traumatic slavery syndrome, and we've been talking about it. And we also talk about it as we're dealing with gun violence and things like that. But we also talk about how we don't have Black doctors anymore or Black clinics anymore. Beverly Hawkins started Model Cities Health Center. I think it's still around. I heard it's still around, but we need more Beverly Hawkins. We need more Model Cities Health Centers. And we need for our psychiatrists and social workers to come up with a way to treat post-traumatic slavery syndrome. And that's going to be part of our reparatory justice work. We're going to come back. We're going to jump right back into a track. We're going to jump into some music for our listening audience here on WFNU. And then we're going to come back and talk more about Herschel Walker and HR 40 and the momentum that is behind the reparations movement right now here in Minnesota and throughout the United States, right here on the Trahern Cruise Show, 94.1 FM, Frogtown Tuned In Radio. So yeah, another thing that was interesting to me at the hearing, it was just like some of the technical stuff, some of the technical some of the technical issues wasn't really cool for a Senate hearing like that. You know, I think there was a hearing for HR1 happening. HR1 is a bill to give like more voter protections, but it actually hurts third parties, and it changes matching funds from 5,000 to 25,000, and that's really going to hurt third parties. So don't support that until they fix that. But they were having a hearing about that at the same time, and the hearing from that started bleeding into HR 40, which was really disrespectful. So the technical stuff could have been a little better. I thought Cam Howard from NCOBRA did a really good job responding to some of Larry Elder's comments about blacks, fathers in the home, and why this and that. But Cam was talking about how we were just talking about how white supremacy and institutional racism is affecting the racial wealth gap. And that's one of the big reasons why Black households are made up the way they are. So I thought Cam did a good job with that, but I think that it could have been more technically sound. It also could have been, there should have been like more economists maybe as a witness for HR 40 side. I thought who really did good, and we're going to try to pull her up shortly, was the lady from Japan. And she spoke about the commission. So a lot of people right now, they just be like, man, we don't need no study. HR 40's garbage. Just give me my check right now. Cut it. And I agree with that. So like the St. Paul Recovery Act calls for short-term and long-term strategies to address the racial wealth gap, because we know that there is needs right now that Black people are hurting right now, and they can't wait for a 2, 3, 4 year study. They need relief right now. So there's things that need to happen right now, and there's an executive order that Black Lives Matter Minnesota is part of a collective called the Reparations Collective. A sister named Dawn wrote an executive order that addresses some of our short-term needs right now. And so those are things that can be implemented right now that can bring in relief to Black people. Also, the stimulus package, $1.9 trillion is about to come out. We need to make sure that the American descendants of chattel slavery get our just due. Joe Biden wouldn't be able to put out a stimulus package if Black people didn't go out and vote for him. So anytime like these types about this much money is coming out, Black people, we need to make sure that we are getting our fair share. These last couple stimulus packages, we've really been left out, especially our business community, right? So we got to make sure that doesn't happen. Let's bring our listening audience back in real quick. No doubt, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. You are listening to So we're going to just we're going to take a quick listen to Herschel Walker like we were talking about earlier, he was making the case actually for reparations with some of the things that he was saying. And when he was talking about when he was diagnosed with mental illness because he was bullied by some white kids when he was little. And then when he got older, he had a mental health crisis and almost tried to commit suicide because of the white racism he experienced when he was a child. And we call that PTSS, or post-traumatic slave syndrome. And we need to, and so part of our reparations proposal, I hope, will be coming up with ways to treat post-traumatic slavery syndrome. I think any social worker that works for Ramsey County that is dealing with foundational Black American children or a foundational Black American household should be able to deal with post-traumatic slavery syndrome, be able to identify it and get people the help they need for it. And I think one of the best ways to treat post-traumatic slavery syndrome is going to be justice, right? So that's what the St. Paul Recovery Act is all about. It's about economic justice. And when people don't get justice, it causes them and their institutions to be imbalanced, right? So we got to balance the scales. And I think the way to balance the scales is through economic justice and reparations for the American descendants of chattel slavery. So Herschel Walker, he was testifying at here's just a quick piece. See? Now hold on. Let's just stop right there. He said hundreds of years later, we're still not free because of racism and segregation. And he calls that reparations. What is he talking about? I have no idea what he's talking about. Let's let him go on a little more, though. So see, and this is the type of things, these are the type of things that we're talking about when we just, so I have an uncle, man, who passed away, a great uncle, Uncle Abel, man, rest in peace, rest in heaven to Uncle Abel. He fought in the war. And just like the other brother who came back and said he had to flee after the war because of Jim Crow. So this was a Republican. He testified too and said he had to flee from Texas because of Jim Crow. So he's also making the case for reparations because he had to flee. But we was glad after he fled, his family, he feels, was successful. And that's good. But you're still owed a debt because you had to flee because of racism, right? Herschel Walker said his grandma, bless her heart, who's in her 80s, told him, who's going to pay the people who fought in the revolutionary, in the Civil War? The United States government paid them already, right? The United States government paid pensions to Union soldiers. There was one Union soldier. This lady was getting pensions up until 2015 from the Civil War. Still getting pensions from the Civil War up till 2015. So that's who paid them. They already got paid, Grandma Walker. They already got cut. They already got their payment. But Uncle Abel didn't. Uncle Abel didn't benefit from the GI Bill. A lot of black soldiers didn't benefit from the GI Bill, but they fought hard for America and was treated horribly. So a debt's owed today. No doubt. Shout out to Diana C. Brown. Shout out to Green Party California, standing up, checking in. I'm going to calm it down. I'm glad y'all's listening. But a debt's owed, man. And so we need health, wellness, healing for black families and communities. We need hospitals, that can treat, that can deal with post-traumatic slavery syndrome and our condition in the world, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for tuning in. We're going to keep talking about this HR 40 hearing on my next break. I'm about to bring in some more music for our listening audience. Again, to the people in the Frogtown community, or if you live in St. Paul, if you want to be a part of the St. Paul Recovery Act, if you want to sit on the board and offer your expertise, the applications to sit on the Legislative Advisory Committee for the St. Paul Recovery Act are coming out in March. Again, you can check the City of St. Paul's website to sign up, or you can contact City Councilwoman Jane Prince, or you can contact myself. If you are a black organization or organization that has a lot of people of color, or whoever that just has a progressive organization, and we can come talk to your organization about the St. Paul Recovery Act and the application process for the Legislative Advisory Committee. Again, contact Jane Prince. You can contact myself, and we'll come out to your church, to your school, to your business, or we can connect on Zoom, and we'll let you guys know how this process is going. You're listening to the Trahern Cruise Show on 94.1. Those applications will be out in March, though. So please get a hold of us ASAP. You're listening to the Trahern Cruise Show on 94.1 FM. No, so like I was saying earlier, though, let me find it real quick, because it was ill. That's been a big argument, and I understand that argument, man. I need, what do you say? Call 1-800. I need cash now, and I know we're hurting. We need that money right now. We ain't got a lot of time to be playing, because the median income by 2053 is zero. You dig? So I know what you're going through, and I know we don't, we know that the damage, we know how slavery damaged us. We know how Jim Crow damaged us. So we're like, man, I need that paper right now. But then sometimes if we rush, then we get shorted. And then we still find ourselves in poverty. And we still find ourselves giving our money to a racist system, right? So there's also going to have to be some system change involved in reparations, so that we don't remain the permanent unemployed or the permanent low-income people, right? So reparations really has to be for real repair. It can't just be like, oh, we gave y'all some money and then now you're back in the same condition, economic condition, social condition, and political condition. We don't want the descendants of slaves to remain the bottom caste in society. That's what reparations is all about. It's about repair. So with the Japanese, I can't remember her name, but she she said that the commission was important, and then she said the name of the commission. So I've seen other reparations activists say that the Japanese didn't have a commission, right? But she just came with the facts. And and she just kind of cleared the air on, how I thought it was good to hear from her on how the Japanese obtained reparations. No doubt, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. You are listening to the Trahern Crew Show on 94.1 FM, Frogtown Tuned In Radio. So just before the break, man, we was listening to, shout out to Herschel Walker, though. I mean, it was brave of him to come up there and do that. He said he had been studying reparations for a year. So I think, I think the Republicans have been preparing him to come out and speak against reparations. You got people like Larry Elder was there. Larry Elder's not really like, he's a talk show host. He's a journalist. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should hear from, everybody in society. But he was just basically, Larry Elder has built his career off of talking bad about Black people pretty much and putting us down. And that's how he gets paid. So the Republicans went and got him to come talk back. He never switched, but the other two Blacks, you could see them going through a little spiritual change during HR 40, and just really the history was affecting, especially Herschel Walker. I thought that was amazing. So his testimony was amazing to me, not because it was designed to be, it was just like what ended up happening and his responses and the historical trauma that he has went through manifested itself in this HR 40 hearing. And then even the congressman, I think from Utah or Colorado, one of those states he was from, his testimony when he started talking about his family member having to move because of systemic racism. So I thought that those were really great pieces that happened organically, that the Black Republicans who were there to speak against HR 40 actually spoke on behalf of it by accident. Last weekend in DC, met a Republican. He ran for Senate, trying to get him to come back to be an independent, but he supports reparations. And there's a lot of Black Republicans who support reparations, and we need to get in touch with them and start talking to them and start working across the aisle, right? There's Black Republicans. Senator Scott out there in North Carolina, man. We need to talk to him. What's the brother down there? He mishandled Breonna Taylor's case. The attorney general, hey, you need to get your card back. You need to try to make things right. Come out and support this justice claim. And let's reach across the aisle to the Black Republicans, man, and try to get them on code. So we can get this bag, man. We're talking about a $16 trillion bag. Black Republicans, you should want to see Black people get paid. And there's nothing wrong with that. So we need y'all to jump on board too. Call Congress this week. If you can, call your congressperson. If they haven't signed on to HR 40, make sure they sign on to HR 40. If they have already signed on to HR 40, tell them we want you to bring HR 40 to the floor for a vote. in the next 4 weeks. There's no reason why HR 40 shouldn't pass. There's no reason why we can't just study reparations and study slavery and study white supremacy. There's no reason why Congress shouldn't vote yes for that. And the Democrats control Congress. The Democrats control the federal government, the presidency, and the Senate. So there's no excuse today. We delivered. Now it's time to collect. Black people delivered in Georgia. Black people delivered in Detroit. We delivered in Philadelphia. We delivered in Milwaukee. And we gave Joe Biden the election. And right now, a lot of Black people are feeling left out. That in the first 100 days, there's been a lot of executive orders, but none of these executive orders have addressed what the descendants of slavery wants and what we need, right? So, we can't say we told you so, but we went out. Some people, a lot of us went out and voted without demanding anything. So in the next election cycle, which is coming up in 2022, we're putting together a Black agenda, right? And this agenda, you can come to when a politician comes to you, we can hold it up to them and say, hey, do you support reparations? If they say no, then we'll say, hey, thank you. Have a nice day. I'm going to vote for somebody else. And that's how we're going to start moving going forward. Alexandria Cortez, definitely. Give her a call, please. Kathy said, check up on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Definitely. And she probably will help others sign on, right? So that's what we need to be doing. Again, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in, but we got to apply this pressure to get HR 40 passed in the next 30 days. So let's call your congressman, even if they're Republicans, call them too if that's who your congressperson is, and tell them to sign on to HR 40 and bring that to a vote. You're listening to the Trahern Cruz Show on 94.1 FM, Frogtown Tuned In Radio. So yeah, again, Angie Craig, definitely give her a call. Call your congressperson and tell them to vote on HR 40. So we're gonna try to find this we're gonna try to find this little piece from the Japanese lady who and she testified too, and I thought her testimony was really great. The things that she had to say about HR 40 and why it was important. One, because I won't let nobody press up and mess up the scene I set. I like to stand in the crowd. One thing I did like about the hearing is the reparations activists were saying things like, well, it's not about a check, and it ain't just about a check. No, it's not just about a check. But the check is very important if we're going to be serious about closing the racial wealth gap and system change. But I think when we say things like, it's not about a check, I think Black people And even some of our allies think that that's going to make white people be more supportive if you say it's not just about a check. And I don't think that's the case. I think we need to be upfront and honest about reparations. So after HR 40 passes, there's no surprises. Like, oh, you guys said this wasn't about no money. And then you'll be like, well, or that the larger population of Black people, when they hear the word reparations, they're thinking about cash. And then you say, well, we passed this, but you're not going to get no money, then that's going to be a big disappointment and kind of useless to the American descendants of chattel slavery. So, again, I'd like to thank you guys all for tuning in. This is what we're working on this week. We're going to reinstitute our food shelf program. My brother Gerald Perry's running for mayor, so he's going to be He's going to be doing this food drive at River Alive Church, and whether he's running for mayor or not, he's doing that. But we really want to make it big and get the word out about that, so you can drop food off. I think that's the second week in March, the second Friday in March, and then people can come pick that up that Saturday. The applications for the reparations steering committee will be out in March. If you want us to come talk to your organization about it, you can contact myself or City Councilwoman Jane Prince. The application should be on the website next month. And the George Floyd trial starts next month, so make sure you tune in for that. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. We're going to go live on Black St. Paul page, my personal page, and some other pages this week, and we're going to keep you informed about events and policies and things that are important to your life that are happening this week. All right, thank you for tuning in. Peace.
Quick and I take you for a walk through hell. Freeze your dome, then watch your eyeballs swell. Guide you out of triple stage darkness. When they get dark again,